Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors and officers. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's meeting. And Wodonga Council acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first peoples of the country. We also acknowledge them as traditional owners and custodians across various lands. We pay our deepest respect to their ancestors, elders, children and young people, and we acknowledge the strength and resilience of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and recognise their continuous connections to lands, waters and communities across the country. And I know we all join each other in doing so. Item number 3 is our apologies and requests for leave of absence. Councillor Quilty is still on her leave of absence due back August 23rd. And we're looking forward to the holiday photos. Councillor Lowe joins us remotely this evening due to COVID impact, so will be part of this evening's meeting in a hybrid format. Item 4, declarations under the Acts, Regulations, Codes and Local Laws. Mr CEO, none there, I believe. Item 5, declaration by councillors of any conflict of interest. I wasn't made aware of any previously. Still the case, councillors. Thank you very much. The confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting, councillors. You've got a recommendation there. Someone happy? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hall. Anyone wish to speak against? No, thank you. Item 7, delegates reports. There are none this month. On to item 8.1, our first report for determination. This one's the review of the governance rules, councillors, as per email circulated post the publishing of tonight's agenda. Just a reminder, it remains at only the 3 submissions on this one, but happy to look to somebody for a motion. Councillor Mildren, as per recommendation, or no? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Move the recommendation except that Rule 80.3, we add the words except for a motion to resume standing orders at the commencement of the sentence.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Just before I get a seconder, bear with me a moment. Thank you. Governance officer seems that won't create an issue. Is there a seconder for that one? Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just added that little bit in because I think it was making a bit of a mockery. In one sentence it says you can't accept a motion whilst in suspended of standing orders, and then in the next sentence it says, oh, but you take a motion to resume standing orders. That's sort of contradictory, so I think that just completely clarifies it. And as for everything else, I'm reasonably satisfied with where we've reached. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall.
Firstly, I'd like to thank all the people who provided their feedback on the draft review of our governance rules. We're always welcome and value your input, and I'm glad to see that we did get some. Sometimes we don't, but we did get some this time. And as a result of my concerns and that of those in a couple of the submissions received to the draft governance rules around changing the time limits for councillors moving and speaking to an item listed in the council meeting agenda, the recommendation in this report has recommended not to change the time limits as recommended in the draft governance rules and leave them as they were originally, and that was adopted back in August 2020. The report in the meeting agenda notes there was merit in the submissions received by the community around limiting speaking times for councillors, and that this would lead to poorer decision making. The key views by the submitters received were that there was a risk that the reduction in speaking times may result in less transparency, good debate, and reducing the time limit doesn't allow councillors to clearly state their position and their reasons for it, which, as I mentioned before, may result in less transparency and poorer outcomes for the community. I totally agree with the submitters, and I'm glad the officer report reflects some of the submitters' feedback on this in this recommendation in the report. Except for council meeting length of time, which is still recommended to be 3 hours with a possibility of a half an hour extension of time to that time frame, I think that is workable. Generally, we are finished within the before the 3 hours is up, and only on the odd occasion have we gone over. So, I think that change is fine. We also had submission on using of the confidential business items, possibly being overused. This is a decision the CEO determines. In the past, the percentage of decisions made in confidential business have been under the state average, but with the numerous land sales Council has negotiated over the last couple of years, this has risen. Whilst I am a very strong supporter of less decisions being decided in closed meetings, for community transparency reasons, I also recognise when councillors dealing with negotiation for land sales, recruitment and the annual review of our CEO, we need to be in a closed meeting. If this is done this way, it could lead to, if we had it open, it could lead to competitive, legal and reputational damage for our councils. So we have to be very mindful of doing this. I know I am a believer of our council and our new CIOs too are committed to wanting transparency and decision making for our community. So all in all, I think the governance rules comes to a good balance, and I support it going out.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillors? Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, just probably clarification. I gather Councillor Mildren's going for option 2 with his plus his little change. Is that what we're voting on? No. With the recommendation 1.
Councillor Watson, it was as per recommendation, but with changes to the wording on one particular section. So did you want to debate, enter the debate at all? Or? Happy? Councillor Simpfendorfer?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add, I understand the concerns around transparency for the time limits of talking, etc. And the premise behind it is to try and make things, I guess, more succinct and not susceptible to bad decision making, but making our responses nice and succinct for the community and our meetings. And it's mindful at the point I'm going to make here is that there is the option to suspend standing orders, and we can have robust debate, rigorous debate over those important community issues where there are no time limits. And from my memory, without any statistics, I think on the whole we've granted those when it's been asked for to suspend any standing orders to enter that debate. I'm happy with the recommendation. I'll support as it is, but I just think it's important to note to some of those community members that there are other options other than just those time limits. We can suspend standing orders and speak longer than need be.
Thanks, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Lowe, did you want to participate in the debate? Yeah.
Yeah, and just speaking of being succinct and in time, I'll just echo Councillor Hall's thoughts since she's almost read my note by note out here, so I won't go back over it for everybody, and I'll keep the time frame a little bit small. But I'm just glad that the officers agreed with the submitters and stuck with their recommendation of keeping the times the same, because I wouldn't have supported it if they reduced speaking time. I know we've got alternatives like suspending standing orders or asking the chair for more time. I just think it was a layer that didn't need to be added into our governance rules. And I realise they need to be updated and constantly reviewed to match legislation and that, and I think that's what we're doing here tonight. And I think making changes that are necessary are good, but making changes that aren't necessary is not something I really put my hand up for. So I'll be voting to support Councillor Mildren's version of the motion and recommendation tonight for those reasons. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Just before we go to Councillor Mildred in closing, I just thought I'd pass some commentary and enter the debate myself, because I won't be supporting this. And I believe that council's missed an opportunity in encouraging better engagement with our community, because quite often I get the feedback of people participating in or watching a meeting where they say, what was all the waffle about? Get to the point, you know, tell me the facts, tell me the data, tell me what I need to know about how you made a decision that way. And when I look at the streaming numbers, the attendance this evening, things like that, I often think, well, are we doing the best we can to communicate with and engage in our community, or are we sitting here sometimes for ourselves with our own hyper increased importance perhaps on some occasions? So having witnessed many debates over many years done in very succinct timing and being able to be done in 1 or maybe 2 minutes and put points and really get points across, and sometimes, yes, that might be under the influence of a larger group of people needing to have a say than 7. I think this was a missed engagement opportunity which wasn't reflected in the report as perhaps one of the potential gains out of changing speaking times. But you know, I think I might lose my voice on that one tonight, judging by it. But Councillor Mildren, thank you in closing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just summing up, I recognise the contributions from the community, and I understand that there's been a bit more community conversation than the actual submissions that we received, and I've had a number of people speak to me about the various things that come in the proposed governance rules that are before us tonight. The process that we've been through with this has been quite rigorous, and we've put together a fairly strong set of rules. I don't agree with excuse me, everything that's in there. There's certain things that you win some, you lose some in all these things. This is one occasion where I think keeping the times to speak has been an appropriate reflection of the community's wishes and an appropriate reflection of the times necessary to make a statement about the various issues that come before the council in ordinary business. And I accept the statement that Councillor Simpendorfer has said in relation to suspending standing orders, and we still will need to do that in certain circumstances where the issues require more vigorous conversation. In terms of where this governance rules stand, I think we've got to a reasonable outcome. We've worked through the process to get here, so put the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Jeez. Thanks, councillors. Is that, if my maths right, is that 3-3? Right. Did we get... I might call that one again just to make sure, because I did think I heard a lot of people say they're supporting it. Maybe my statement was convincing. I'm not too sure. All those in favour? All those... Oh, okay. All those against? Slight delay. We've got lag time. So carried 4-2. Geez, that got nervous for a moment there. I was going to have to use a casting vote on my own opinion. Potentially. On to item 8.2. Just so I know, Councillor Lowe, can you raise your hand when you hear me say raise your hand now? Just so I know how big a delay it is. Yeah, so it's substantial. It's a good few seconds. I'll keep that in mind for the rest of the meeting. Speaking of which, item 8.2 is live streaming, recording and publishing of council meetings. Policy, councillors, is there anybody that would like to move a motion? Simpendorfer, as per recommendation. Got a seconder? Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Simpendorfer.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think probably example tonight speaks for itself in that we have the opportunity to live stream with one of our councillors in a position of COVID impact, and I think that's just the way we are at the moment. The policy is quite pointed in how and why these will happen. There is an opportunity there for, if there's future technology advancements in the budget, that we can increase our capacity here with what we do and how we do live stream. But it allows us to, in these situations of COVID times and other factors, whether that may be delayed flights or whatever the case may be, that we can still have councillors attend via Zoom meetings that are extraordinary. So I support the recommendation as published. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The policy hasn't been reviewed, and I think it was probably the first draft of it was back in 2018, pre-COVID and pre a lot of things, and state government has changed their views on live streaming and all sorts of things to have an actual council meeting. In 2018, we could not have held a live streaming council meeting due to the local government laws at that stage. So this is a policy that needs to be probably updated as technology updates all the time, and with technology and things like that. But yeah, it's worthwhile being able to have council laws streaming in, because there are times when they're not available, but they are available on live. So I think it's good we've updated our policies and direction.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, the way we've gone through the process of reaching this redrafted policy has been quite rigorous, and I think it's the outcomes of these things are never perfect, and you don't always get what you're after. But I think this one's fairly close to the mark. We've come with a presumption in terms of the virtual attendance at council meetings. We've come with the presumption that everybody will attend unless you've got a good reason not to, and I think COVID's a very good reason not to. And I think it's a very common sense approach that we've set in place to deal with it. So I think we've got a reasonably good policy for the purposes at this present point in time. I would suggest that we need to keep an eye on it and keep in touch with how things move and change and shift. Keep an eye on things like the security of meetings, particularly if you've got the confidential aspects of a meeting and you've got a councillor coming in virtually. We need to be certain that we've got all those bases covered to the best of our ability. And I think this policy at this point in time addresses those things adequately, but we should be keeping on top of it and watching what happens into the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall.
Yes, I agree. One of the things that has always concerned me, and I've made it known that with the live streaming, for a council that comes into a meeting, or even sometimes a briefing, depending what's being discussed, is the security issue, and we don't have any way of knowing that someone else could be in the room, but there's an element of trust that goes with that, and I think councillors do take that oath when we put our hand up to be a councillor, that we will do the right thing and that we're in a secure area where there is the possibility of that confidentiality being breached. So we do have to have a trust in our councillors, and so I think that's been addressed. So, and we need to have policy around live streaming. We've had it, and it's time, that we did have an update. And with the new Local Government Act back in 2020, we needed to adopt some of the ideas around that. Additional definition to specify what an open council meeting terminology is. Explanation around voucher to live stream council meetings and the new legislation, additional explanation on editing of recording. So there's some of the things that were brought up in the report. So all in all, I think we have addressed most of the issues of concern around live streaming.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Lowe, the only one that hasn't contributed, but I'm happy to move on to closing if you've got nothing further to add. You're all good. Thank you very much. Mover Councillor Simpfendorfer. Nothing further. I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Your hand was up initially, John, wasn't it? Yeah, thank you. Yep, thank you. Carried unanimously. 8.3, the 2022 General Revaluation. Councillors. Somebody like to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Mildren. As per recommendation, thank you. If we got a seconder, thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably we've said this the last couple of times, but the revaluations and the process involved in that now is something that's led by the state government and effectively directed through the state government. The valuations are done annually instead of every 2 years, and we notice this time around that there's been marked increases in the valuations of properties as a direct response to the boom that we've had in our property system over the last, say, 18 months or so. And that's brought about its own issues and concerns that we'll talk about in the next item that comes up before us tonight. But when you get revaluations that have marked increases in the valuations of many properties, and you get a divergence between, say, industrial and commercial and residential properties. It raises a whole range of issues that we can talk about in the next issue. But when we deal with the revaluation, it's set by the state government. The valuers take into account all the reasonable things that go to making up the value of a property, including, in our case, the situation of the development of the site, the land, the buildings and so on, the added value to the property from the different things that might be done on it. So we get a reasonably good and accurate reflection of what the market is, and then it's up to us to distribute that across in our rates revenue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Simpfendorfer? No? Councillors? Councillor Hall?
I wrote a fair bit here, but Councillor Mildren has covered some of it, although not in the way I probably would have spoken to it. But the valuations that we received have quite substantially across, especially residential areas, risen. Our property prices have risen, some over 30%, and we had some idea that that was going to happen. I spoke to it before during our budget. We had some idea before we actually signed off on our budget that that would be the case. And if we'd kept our, I call it multiplication CIV factor, if we'd kept what we had from our last budget, which was 0.005036, with the new valuations, it would have quite substantially risen some residential rates. Probably, to my view, was quite, I think a lot of people would have screamed about it. So we had to address this fairly, and that's what rating is all about, is fairly, spreading it across all the rating categories. We reduced the multiplication rate, which has brought it back down quite considerably, which makes it more palatable for the residential rate rises going forward. And whilst some people will still have a bit of a rate rise with the new valuations, as Councillor Mildren said, this is done, it's out of our hands, it's done by the Valuer General's valuers, and we are the ones that we get the same rating money. We get the same money from the rates. We're not getting any extra from the new valuations, but we have to. We had to work a way of distributing it in a fair manner across all the rating categories, and I think we've done quite a good job in doing that. And I will still highlight that we are only putting the rates up by 1.5%, which is still under the rate cap, Victorian State Government rate cap of 1.7. I've seen commentary otherwise, but that's what we're doing. And I think we've done a pretty good job, and as I said, I appreciate all the work that was done beforehand to address this, and I think now it's just a matter of accepting the valuations that have come through, which is something that we sort of have to do. It's not something that we can knock back. So they're the rates, they're the valuations of the property, and we'll just have to accept them and adopt them.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillors, if not in closing, Councillor Mildren, just put the motion. Okay, all those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. I just have to wait a few seconds for Councillor Lowe. The item 8.4 is the Revenue and Rating Plan Review. Councillors, this is something that we'd resolved some time ago to start a little earlier than what was traditionally required from memory. So, somebody prepared to move a motion? Councillor Hall, is it as per recommendation? Councillor Hall, yep. And we've got a seconder. Councillor Simpfendorfer, thank you, Councillor Hall. Oh, sorry, just before we do that, thanks, Kevin. Reminder, even though that was in front of me here somewhere. Thanks, Kevin. The options there, should you wish, that for point 2 of the recommendation, that the councillor representatives on the Revenue and Rating Plan Reference Group be Councillor Graham Simpfendorfer as chairperson, Councillor Olga Quilty, with Councillor Ron Mildren as a substitute representative should two be required. Happy to strike out substitute? Okay. So Councillor Simpfendorfer and Councillor Quilty, are you happy to have that as the motion, Councillor Hall?
Yes.
Yeah? Yep. So outside of that, it's a recommendation. So it just essentially gives the officers the full appointment of who our two reps are. Councillor Simpfendorfer, that was still the case for you to second. You're happy with that? Okay, Councillor Hall, thank you.
Okay, so I support the recommendation. It is probably timely that we had this review done. Having been on the last review reference group, I believe there is real value in doing a review now, and how it. I hope the new reference group will be open-minded and practical in how they choose to look at how we collect rates. You know, and they will look at the categories, the cancelled charges, fees, and what is required and spread across the whole rating categories. So how many, through the Mayor, Officer Klein, how many rating categories do we have? 7, yeah. So we have 7 rating categories. It's up to the reference group to decide whether we have less or more, or keep the same, or adjust the amount, whether it's a 1 differential or 2. Yeah. So it's a fairly complex bit of work. It takes some time to put together. It's not easy. People think that it's easy just to come up with that and work it out, but it's when you take from one, it affects someone else. It's quite a complex to get it even and fairly distributed, and that's the issue that the rating reference group will have to deal with. But it'd be great if they can sort of think outside the square, and maybe there are some things that we could do differently. And so I look forward for them to have their recommendations come back up to council when it's completed next year, and if it's something that's going to be a benefit going forward when we do the next council budget, I hope that we can achieve some good outcomes with it.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Simpfendorfer?
Probably not too much more to add there, Mr Mayor, but I'll just, for those listening at home and those that will see point D, that the Chief Executive Officer will advertise to seek public nominations for membership on this reference group, and I'll encourage everyone that's either done it before or wishes to get their head around it a bit more to apply, come along and hopefully be entertained somewhat by the Chair if this gets up, and make it exciting to the point that, but it is a serious thing, and we have seen, the impacts that it can have across our community with, such a large increase in the general re-evaluations and how that's distributed. So it's important work that we do for our community as a whole, and it impacts every one of us. And without what was done throughout the last budget, there will be many people in our community that will be suffering and doing it really hard. So it's important work, very serious stuff. I don't mean to joke about it, but it will be entertaining, I'm sure. So if this motion gets up, but definitely look out for that advertising, and I look forward to hopefully working with many members of the community.
Thanks, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillors, Mildren?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we've learned a really interesting lesson in this year's budget process and setting of rates, where we had a policy in place that was somewhat rigid and had established a distribution that, if we had have stuck with it and not gone through the steps to actually amend that for this year's rates, we would have had a situation where the increase in rates on residential properties would have been very significant, and we would have had a lot more hardship and a lot more disappointed and disgruntled members of our community. We actually worked very hard to, and thank you to the staff and the RELS team for working very hard to undertake the modelling that enabled us to be able to bring this back to a reasonably level line, keeping the rate increases consistent with the rates that were paid in previous years, not exactly the same, but consistent as a line through the rating process. There will be people that still receive reasonably significant increases because their properties may well have gone up a lot more than others around them. But by and large, the efforts that were gone to in the budgeting process will see the rates trend line remain reasonably similar and stable compared with last year. So I guess with the revenue and rating plan that we're doing the review on, I'd suggest that we try and encourage the new policy to contain an element of flexibility where we can deal with the impacts that come about from revaluations and the like. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Lowe.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to thank Councillor Simpendorf and Councillor Courty for putting their hand up to be part of the plan review. And just echo Councillor Simpendorf's encouragement of community to come forward and volunteer their skills. I think it's important that we get members of the community from a good cross-section, which would bring a good cross-section of skills to the reference group. So I look forward to seeing in 6 months' time, it's probably worthy of note that in itself, that this is a 6-month process. So it means it's well planned, and so the execution at the end should give good outcomes for us to take into our budgetary period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. In closing, Councillor Hall.
Yeah, just one more thing, which I sort of tried to explain last time, but didn't do too well with. But with the multiplication factor, which is what we changed, as I said, I changed it from 0.00505563. We changed it and we lowered it to 0.00401000. So this was done to evenly spread to make a reduction and evenly spread the rises impact onto the council rate. So there was a reduction in that, but we still have the 1.5% council rate rise as well.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillors therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And Councillor Simpendorf, you can borrow my book on how to make rates discussions interesting as a chair. Thanks very much. Item 8.5, the Junction Place, a proposed memorandum of understanding, the MOU. Councillors, there is a recommendation there for us. Councillor Mildren, moving. Yeah, sure. Councillor Mildren moves that we suspend standing orders. Is there a seconder? All right. Just go to the vote. So all those in favour of suspending standing orders? All those against? Carried 4-2. Councillor Mildren, did you have a motion? Don't have a motion. You wanted to have a conversation? Yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Where we start with this, this is very complex, and where we start with this, I see Junction Place as the single most important development precinct in Wodonga, with significant visual, aesthetic, social, functional and economic impacts and influences over the long-term success of the city. And this will go for probably 100 years. It'll impact for up to 100 years.
Councillor Mildren, technicality, we do need a motion first before we can suspend standing orders, according to our governance rules. So we'll resume standing orders and mover and a seconder to resume standing orders. Is there a mover to resume standing orders first, John? Thanks, Councillor Lowe. A seconder? Councillor Simpendorf, all those in favour of resuming? Yeah, thank you. We've resumed. Now we're looking for a motion first before we suspend standing orders. So you've got a motion, Councillor Watson. So you're moving as per recommendation is what you'd like to do. Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this has been a long-term issue with our community, and I think this is a great way of having better communications and trust with our community, and having a mechanism to convey between community, council and the developers.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer, reserving your right. Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Mildred, you want to move to suspend standing orders? Thank you. Have you got a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. All those in favour of suspending standing orders? Those against? Carried 4-2. Councillor Mildred, Councillor Simpfendorfer had reserved his right, so you're away.
Yeah. All right. I'll continue on. The original intent was to strategically provide for a master plan development at Junction Place and to not just provide for a generic zoning and planning scheme provisions approach where pretty much any outcomes could be applied on an incremental bit-by-bit approach. In other words, what we have in front of us at the moment is a set of planning scheme provisions which apply right across the central business area and don't functionally facilitate individual master planning at a strategic sense by the council in regard to the Junction Place. And that doesn't differentiate it from the zone provisions that apply to any other area in essence, other than a small component of specific stuff that's got specific bits for all the whole central business area, but that small area. The draft MOU provides good generic words that can pretty much be interpreted to mean all things good to all people, but in terms of sound strategic governance and planning, to reach a comprehensively planned development that addresses the next 50 to 100 years, the MOU comes up in short, in my opinion. The process under this MOU does not adequately differentiate between the high-level strategic planning responsibilities of council and the routine planning approval responsibilities that are ordinarily delegated domain of staff. The planning scheme provisions that we are encouraged to retain and support tonight exempt applications for planning permit from public notice and therefore from third-party appeals. And if anybody wants to check that, it's clause 3708-8 and clause 7 of the ACZ schedule. Actually specifically sets that out. So in that context, it's probably the case that the applications that were received but withdrawn previously in relation to the bottle shop probably didn't need to be or couldn't be given public notice. But as it turned out, it didn't need to be decided anyway. The MOU does not recognise the functions of council under the planning authority role, that is the strategic role of council, or the importance of the elected council in strategic and related decisions and decisions of community interest. In essence, the MOU relegates elected councillors to informed bystanders, both in respect to strategic master planning and community interest decision making. Given that the public notice exemptions apply for planning permits in Junction Place, then no objections will be received and no planning application decisions need be put to the elected council for a decision. The project steering committee is to comprise council officers as the only representatives of council and only officers on the planning and delivery working group. It's unclear in this documentation as to who will represent council on the community reference group. And indeed, it is somewhat puzzling to think that council should, intrude on the community reference group, given the statutory role of council and the purpose of the group as an individual community voice. This proposed MOU and terms of reference for the community reference group effectively relegates elected councillors to informed bystanders and the council staff to responders to statutory inquiry and formal application for permits. The elected councillors and indeed council generally will have little role in the master planning or strategic planning for Junction Place if we agree the documents and proceed before us. Now, tonight we've heard comments that to an extent are reassuring from DV prior to the council meeting, and I don't question the motivation of DV, but in the consequences or in the circumstances of what we've got, we need to have an MOU that actually recognises the role of council and doesn't discount the strategic planning role of council in influencing what happens on the site. We need to be able to ensure that the planning scheme reflects the appropriate outcomes, and my opinion at the moment is that the planning scheme as it stands does not reflect a good position to achieve good outcomes. For example, the planning scheme at the moment would enable somebody to seek a permit and get approval for a permit to build an industry on the site, or to put other forms of activity that would not be consistent with the internal central business area. There's not saying that Development Victoria would do that, but if things got tight and land was sold and on-sold through a process, we could see that happening without any control by the council. Whilst the planning scheme has a set of zone table of uses that allow uses that shouldn't be in there, but might be okay somewhere else on the periphery of the central business area, for example, that would be consistent under the activity centre zone, then we really need to have a think about what we're putting in place and how we've got strategic planning provisions and the specific statutory provisions that come out of that strategic planning in place in our planning scheme. At the moment, I just think to approve particularly point number 1 in the motion that's before us, I think is selling this whole thing short and making a really difficult situation for the council into the future. I'll leave it at that for the time being. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. I hope I wasn't off-putting. Just our screen with Danny's visibility was about to shut down, so I wanted to make sure that it doesn't shut down before I can't see what his hands are doing. We're all good. Thank you very much. Councillor Lowe, entering debate. Yes, thank you.
Just a question for Councillor Mildren. You're saying the activity centre zone is a little bit too flexible, I think is what you're saying. What zone do you think it should be, and what are the possible negatives to that zone?
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Mildren.
There's a couple of presumptions in the question that says that, which is normal in the planning system in an everyday sense, and that is that we take the zones down from the suite of zones under the state planning framework. In the circumstances of this case, I'd say we should be doing a comprehensive development zone that specifically addresses the things that strategically apply to the councils, and given the conversation this afternoon, by and large, we seem to be on the same page as DV. We should be trying to develop provisions that specifically reflect those things, that are statutory provisions that set out the process and set out the criteria upon which development continues. So to answer the question, I think it should be the comprehensive development zone, which is a zone that can be specifically designed to suit the circumstances and criteria that we want to see happen on the location.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Councillors, we are suspended, so if anyone else wants to jump in, feel free. If not, have we exhausted all debate at suspending orders? Do we resume standing orders? I see Councillor Simmendorfer, resuming. Yep. Did I say you want to second that, Councillor Lowe, to resume? Yep. Thank you. We'll put it to the vote to resume standing orders. All in favour? Yep. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Councillor Simpendorfer, reserved your right to speak.
Mr Mayor, we've this MOU that's before us, I think at point 2 there is the intent and the purpose of this MOU is to establish a constructive project culture and set out the roles and responsibilities of the signatory parties for a state-led development delivery activities at Junction Place, Wodonga. We go on and we see that it's been 10 years or so for now, and then I think it's important to have this MOU. I don't want to go back over where we've been and looking back as we're looking forwards. This MOU does get council involvement. It does get the objectives, the vision and the undertakings of what we want for our city heart. And we've saw what happened when it didn't go quite right, and we saw the community stand up, and that's great. And we saw the votes of the councillors to get us to this point. So I think the MOU is an important step forward to have the, to have the, I guess, the accountability on all parties for this MOU, and that's the intent of it. Who has what role, what the intent is of getting it right for what we want in our city heart, because no one else has this opportunity around our country, and we've heard from DV, that is their intent. That's what they want. They want the same outcomes as what we do and what our community do, but yet they do have a responsibility as well to develop that land. I think this MOU gets us at that table, and yes, the decision does come back to council for a decision, so we are the decision maker at the end. But this also then gives, I guess, some comfort in the fact that we have a community reference group, and whilst there's some feeling around the cadence of that and how that will look, I think it's important that it's on there and that we can work with, as I guess our CEO and his staff can work with Development Victoria to deliver what we need for that city heart. So I'm supportive of the MOU as it is, and I'll be voting yes to this.
Thanks, Councillor Simpendorfer. Councillor Watson, in closing. Yeah, too late. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, for in closing. I think, and Councillor Simpendorfer said, we don't look back in the past, we move forward from this point. I think what's occurred there in development of the old railway station, the goods shed, we've got great bones to move forward. The community realises that and it respects that. And I think our team from Melbourne will deliver something pretty unique there, I think, because they're heard from our community, and this MOU will have a better understanding between all parties. And I think the communication and the trust are the two most important things going forward with this MOU if successful tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors, therefore, I put the motion, which was as per the recommendation. All those in favour? All those against? Carried 4-2. Thank you. On to item 8.6, the proposed land sale at Logic, Lot 102, Bilston Drive, Barnawother North. Councillors, there's a recommendation there for you. Somebody prepared to move a motion? As per recommendation, Councillor Simpendorfer. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Hall. Thank you. Councillor Simpendorfer.
As per the report there, Mr Mayor, I think it's noted that there were no submissions against after this went out to public notice, and it's another step forward for Logic and its development. Not too much more to say, but I think it's great to see having this project go forward to the O'Brien Transport, and looking forward to more sale hopefully out of Logic as we progress through the next 6 to 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Not much to add to that. Yes, this we had a notice of intent to sell the land that's been out on public exhibition, and there were no submissions received, as stated in the report. And now it's just a matter of coming back to get approval to move to the next step and allow the CEO to go forward with the contract of sale and completion of the sale process. So another good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillors. Councillor Lowe, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'll be voting in favour of this recommendation tonight too, but I just want to highlight the success of Logic. It'll be very close to cost neutral now. So the foresight of our councillors go down the path of development out at Logic. I think their foresight is coming to fruition now, and the community will start to not only reap the benefits of jobs, but also the rates that go along with it out of those commercial properties. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. In closing, Councillor Simpfendorfer? No. We'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 8.7 is the updated advocacy plan. Councillors, the recommendation... Oh, hang on. Yeah, that's right. Recommendation there for you. Happy to move as per recommendation. Councillor Watson, have we got a seconder? Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to all the staff that put this document together. It's a lengthy document, but it can be broken up to one page, and with the upcoming state election and upcoming visitors to our city when they do arrive, we have a document on the table ready to go. And some of the projects in that is sort of looking outside the box again. When we first looked at doing Barnawother Fields, when we first looked at Logic, and now we're doing some more things that are outside the box again. So I think it's a fantastic plan so that we can pull apart for individual people, or we can give it as a large document to any potential person coming, or town, potential government that's coming into our city. So yeah, I'm more than happy to endorse this this paper, and thank you very much to the team that's been very well put together.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpfendorfer.
No, well said there by Councillor Watson. I do just highlight the point that, Junction Place is on that advocacy document. So again, that's part of our role to continue advocating for many parts of our city, but Junction's there as well. And I encourage everyone to get in and have a look at it, because it's what we will be advocating heavily for. Thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, not much to add. We have some aspirational projects in that document, like the gondola, which, you never know. It could be something that really, tourism-wise, could move us forward. But, as Councillor Watson said, some of these could be quite long-term type of projects if they come about. But we had the advocacy document out before the federal election this year, but this updated one gives a lot more detail to the document, and will definitely help us lobbying for more funding opportunities going forward. So all in all, good document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Any other councillors wishing to be... Thanks, Councillor Lowe.
I know we encourage our community to read our documents, but I know a lot of them aren't going to read this one. So I just wanted to highlight the fact of how broad this document is. So when our CEO and Mayor is going into all these different state and federal ministers' meetings, etc., and they are asking for things, they've got the community sentiment at their forefront. Pardon me. The hospitals one, housing affordability, the youth foyer, efficient safe transport, Junction Place, Logic, Barnawother Fields, Gateway Island, Hothouse Theatre, the Bangilla Migrant Centre, Wodonga Creek. That's just to name a few of what's in this document. And I just wanted to show the community at home and those in the gallery tonight how broad the document is, and it's very pointed too. So we know what we're asking for, we know how much we're asking for, so it's not leaving anything in doubt. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. In closing, Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, people still keep talking about that gondola. So is one of the documents, one of the articles in the document. So once again, it's just a great document. It really is our plan going forward for our city, because it has lots of the projects we would like to develop for our city. So once again, please pass on to the staff the great work that was done on it.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillors, I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Item 8.8, the Two Cities One Community Partnership Agreement. Councillors, a recommendation there. Happy to move as per recommendation, John. Yep, so that is the actual document being endorsed. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Councillor Watson.
Mr Mayor, probably some of our community aren't really fully on board with the Two Cities One Community, but I think this is a great document and a great partnership agreement to go forward with our external members of our community, external members of government. So once again, it's working together for the greater community of the Two Cities One Community. And this is, just sort of put some rules, guidelines there for us to move forward.
Councillor Simpfendorfer. Yep, fine. Okay. Councillors, Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Wodonga in effect one urban area, and it makes a lot of sense to coordinate strategic planning, common service delivery planning and large-scale procurement processes. However, Albury and Wodonga are separate municipalities located within separate states with differing applicable laws and decision-making processes. And I think we have to recognise and acknowledge all those things in what we put together. Both municipalities will have their own strategic plans and priorities, and each should be respected by the other. There may be high order matters common to both municipal strategic plans, and as may be appropriate at scale, these may be jointly sought and done. But generally speaking, I think our two strategic plans are our two strategic plans, and they should focus on each municipality. And if there's a convergence at the top, well and good, but let's not try and make that a basis of the going forward for 2C1C. Whilst I see opportunities from coordinated approach, we need to stay at the higher regional level of what we're doing and not get into the operational stuff that each of the councils normally do. I think rightly the staff have always informed one another and spoken between each other when things have needed to be considered, and I think we should continue to do that, but not do it as a formalised part of the 2C1C process. I see the vision pillars identified under the agreement as being jargonistic and bureaucratic, and both excessive and limiting at the same time. The scope and order of strategic level interaction and coordination is limited by locking ourselves under those pillars. The objectives of the agreement are unnecessarily wordy and inclusive of references to the individual strategic plans that is far too broad and encompassing of lower order matters specific to each municipality. I don't believe we need to talk of community engagement as an objective. It should ordinarily be part of everything done under the 2C1C. Keeping to the strategic level suggests that articulating actions about when to meet and reference to creating submissions for government should be routine outcomes that come out of the higher order strategic agenda matters and not things that are listed as action plan, part of the action plan. Having said all that, the agreement matters listed in item 5 provide a sound base from which to undertake the strategic planning relevant to 2C1C opportunity. I see the 2C1C as a really strong and good opportunity, but if we continue to go down into the operational minutiae and don't stay right at the top, don't look at the big picture of issues like the strategic planning issues, urban land use issues over the two cities as a unified approach, things like that, then I think we're just messing around the edges and not doing things in a timely and efficient manner. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Hall, you're next in line.
Yes, I will support this agreement. I believe it can achieve great outcomes for our region, but I do hope the partnership stays strategic and simple, like a lot of what Councillor Mildren has spoken about. While working together is important, especially when in a partnership to achieve affordable outcomes for our community and lobbying for high strategic infrastructure. I believe we still need to have our own identity, make decisions for our communities individually, and that at times may have benefits only for us, Wodonga citizens. Our budget commitments may also at times reflect what we can and cannot do together with our 2C1C partnership. It is also my personal view that each council needs to understand, accept each other's views, policies, responsibilities and decisions if this partnership is to last the long term. It's very important that we respect this, and if we can achieve what we set out to achieve with this agreement. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor, give you benefit of the doubt. Did you want to enter on this one, or happy to keep going? All good. Thank you. Just before you do close, Councillor Watson, I'd just like to remind councillors of the wonderful graphics that are on the councillor wall in our little room there, little meeting room that councillors can use from the Wodonga 2033 plan, which clearly highlights that the community, through great consultation, wanted the two cities to work together but not compete with each other and keep trying to one-up each other all the time. So I thought that might be just worth popping in there. I know our new CEO took great pride in taking some photos of those because he hadn't found them yet in his pile of documents, just to see exactly what it was the community had said they wanted for the future of their city. Councillor Watson, in closing.
Mr. Mayor, for the external people that see this, it just shows you that we are two communities that are working together as one on strategic things and future planning. So I've been in it since the start, and I hope it continues for a long time to come.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 8.9, councillors, is the fee for immunisation against JEV. That was what I guess instigated the report, but there is a recommendation there for us councillors, a little bit more comprehensive around our general community vaccination. Was someone prepared to move motion? As per recommendation, Mildren, and happy to second that, Councillor Hall. Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Put the motion, same for you, seconder, Councillor Hall. Yeah, happy to go. All right, all those in favour? All those against? There's none against, so we're carried unanimously. Thank you, as per recommendation. Item 9, which is our reports for information. 9.1 is the Regional Curbside Collection Services contract. There's an update there. Councillors prepared to move that we receive a note. Thanks, Councillor Hall. So, as per recommendation, a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Do you want to speak against? No? Oh, hang on. I'll go to Councillor Hall first. Thanks, Councillor Hall.
The combined curbside collection service with the other councils has been in the past an overall great success. It has provided cost-effective outcomes and is more convenient for all the councils involved, and has achieved some very good diversion rates away from landfill, which therefore makes our waste a little cheaper. The more we send to landfill, the more it costs you as a ratepayer. Our diversion rates, I think, have been around 70%, could be more, so we're achieving good numbers. The tenders for the waste contract will be advertised and will come back to council to be decided on. Having councils agree to this tender process together should provide better contract prices for all councils that have joined up for this agreement. So it's just, I think in the long run will provide a better outcome. Doing it together, we've got more, it's a bit like more buying power, and when you've got more people that are asking, looking for a contractor to do the service, hopefully that will reflect in the price that we receive. So, yep, it's just a matter of this going out, approving of the contracts going out for tender.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Watson, as seconder, you're welcome to speak.
Mr. Mayor, I just really wanted to thank Officer Ferris from the Albury City Council, who we had a Q&A and an update over Zoom. Once again, Zoom coming to the party where we could get all these outstanding councils to come in and listen, and those who are going to be new to this contract, if successful, But I just thought that the presentation was fantastic. It was very clear, concise, and really great questions came through. Wodonga didn't have any questions in the sense that we've been there and done that, but it was very pleasing to see these external councils asking those questions because they haven't been involved in it before. But once again, just thanks to the officers level, that brought it all together. It was a great report and a great night.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Anyone else wishing to speak? Happy to put the motion, Councillor Hall? Yep. All right, all those in favour? Thank you. No one against, so carried unanimously. On to item 10, councillors. So we've got our reports as always. Please jump in, councillor, although I usually whip through these pretty quick. So please throw the hand up nice and clear if you wanted to bring any of these reports to anyone's attention. But 10.1 is the planning report for July 2022. 10.2 is the building report for July. 10.3 is the competitive services report for July. 10.4 the lobbying advocacy meetings and events for July. 10.5 the record of councillor meetings. All good. And the 10.6 the decisions register. Nothing further there. Item 11 is notices of motion, of which there's none. Petitions at item 12, there's none. The council seal at 13, there's none. 14 is general business. Now, a couple of items for everybody's attention today. Wodonga Brass are competing in the Victorian State Championships at Ballarat on Saturday, the 20th of August, so we all wish them very well on behalf of the city. So that's some positive news. Unfortunately, though, Councillor Watson's going to join me in paying tribute to a couple of or particular Councillor Watson's, one of your former colleagues here in this building. If you'd like to start with our sad loss.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. It is a very sad loss that Rayo went too soon. He had 4 odd years in the dementia unit out at Westmont, and very sad demise. For a man who gave so much to our city. He worked his way up through the city as a staff member up to the CO level. I think he came in as town clerk or. Anyway, he was in here with my father actually, so he's been here for a long time. My sympathy is to Dawn and her 3 children and their grandchildren. It was a lovely send-off, but Ray wasn't just involved with the council; he was involved with the Rotary and his family and the golf. Though they're his passions in life, but particularly after seeing his send-off and seeing what he loved in his family, it was just a great credit to the man. He became a councillor, and he could have been very overpowering, but he was a very quiet man. Spoke when he needed to speak, and it was worth listening to Ray when he did speak around this table. It will be a sad loss to our community, and has gone too soon.
Thanks, Councillor Watson, and another commemoration message on behalf of not just the council, but also the entire city, is to the family and the extended family and friends also of Pam Stone, the former mayor of the city of Wodonga. You may have picked up on some of my commentary within the media over the past week or so since that news broke, and I think it's just interesting to reflect. Here we are all these years later, that Pam managed to be not just the first woman elected, but the first deputy mayor that was female, and then also the first female mayor that the city, or under its guise, then had, the rural city of Wodonga. These moments come, and I guess there's nothing that you can say. Particularly, it's tough when you haven't necessarily worked alongside some of these people. But I think as we all sit here as councillors, and anybody who ever does put their hand up, at some point in time, the toll of how selfless it can be to be an elected representative on behalf of your community, I guess, becomes apparent. And I think when you listen to the pride in Pam's family of the achievements that she made, not just as a mayor of the city, but just as being a general citizen, and the way that she was recognised with the IAM in later years as well, I think we are in a much better place now as a city and as a community for her contribution. So have had correspondence with her son Shane over the past few days, and he's very appreciative of the kind words that we've all shared. But again, we stop and reflect and pay respect to those that essentially have sat at a table similar to this over many years and had some pretty good doozies, some blues and some fights to try to get some really good things happening in the community, and may that not be forgotten, particularly in Pam Stone's case. So thank you so much for her service. And again, condolences to family, friends and those extended associates. Councillors, are there any other general business items before we move on this evening? No, thank you very much. So item 15's urgent business, of which there's none. Question time at 16. I believe we had one question leading into this evening, CEO, Mr. CEO. So you're taking care of reading that and the response as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had a question from Cass Wilson in regards to the second entry and exit to Killara Riverside Estate. Mentioned past at the council meeting on the 18th of the 7th. Will there be a change of the speed on the highway before the slip road so people are not flying off the highway at 80 kilometres an hour, or will you signpost both entries to the estate? The answer to that query is that the Murray Valley Highway is the responsibility of the Department of Transport, who are also responsible for setting the speed zone for this particular roadway. It is likely that any approval for the second entrance into the estate will be accompanied by an appropriate reduction in the speed limit, and is at best proposed that discussions be held with the road authority if further information is required. Regarding the speed zone signage, council has recently erected 50 km/h signage to the current entry into the Riverside Boulevard, and will do so again when a second entry is commissioned. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. It was good to be out there at Killara on Friday morning and see those signs were installed pretty much within a week, and well done to the staff and Leon and the team that got that sorted out, because there's plenty of praise coming out of the community out there as well, but as we know, it's only one step towards reducing speeding within our residential streets. So we need to get that message through to the police as often as we can. Item 17 is the confidential business. So there's a recommendation there to close the meeting, councillors. So anybody prepared to move that one? Thank you, Councillor Simpfendorfer. Seconder, Councillor Hall. Does anyone wish to speak against? We'll close the meeting there to the public. Thank you.
You know, you're ready, Kelly.
All right,
All right,
19.2, we adopt. Sorry, 19 point. $19.2, we adopt the in-camera recommendations. Do we have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Silverdorf. A seconder. Councillor Hall. Anyone wish to speak against? No, therefore carried. And that closes the meeting for tonight.